At 9:47 a.m. on February 20th, 1962, John Glenn sits atop a rocket filled with 260,000 pounds of explosive fuel, and ground control tells him something that stops his heart. We're showing a possible heat shield problem. If it's real, you're going to burn up on re-entry. Glenn has 2 hours to think about dying while orbiting Earth at 7,500 miles per hour. His response: "Roger, understand. I'll keep the retro pack on." This calm reply masked the reality. America's newest hero might become a shooting star on live television, watched by 100 million people. This is the real story of Friendship 7, where everything that could go wrong did, and one Marine pilot's courage saved America's space program. By February 1962, America was humiliated. The Soviets had launched Sputnik, put Yuri Gagarin in orbit, and German Titov had orbited Earth 17 times. America. 2 15-minute suborbital hops that the Soviets mocked as flea jumps. President Kennedy had promised the moon, but America couldn't even match what Russia did a year earlier. John Glenn wasn't supposed to be first. Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom had gotten the suborbital flights. Glenn was backup, always backup. At 40, he was the oldest Mercury astronaut, the only one with combat experience in 2 wars, and paradoxically, considered too valuable to risk. He had a squeaky clean image that NASA loved. No affairs, no racing cars, a Presbyterian who actually attended church. But NASA needed a win, and Glenn's flight kept getting delayed. Originally scheduled for December 1961, it was postponed 10 times. Weather, technical problems, a broken microphone bolt. Each delay let Soviet propaganda hammer American incompetence. The press called it Glenn's agony. His wife Annie, who had a severe stutter, faced reporters daily, unable to explain delays she didn't understand. On January 27, 1962, Glenn sat in Friendship 7 for 5 hours before the flight was scrubbed. He'd been up since 2 a.m., eaten the steak and eggs breakfast, suited up, and psychologically prepared to possibly die. Then, cancelled due to weather. He did this 10 times. Each time, millions watched on TV as America failed to launch. Friendship 7 was absurdly small, a tin can 6 feet wide and 9 feet tall. Glenn couldn't stretch his arms fully. The cockpit had 120 switches, 90 circuit breakers, and warning lights everywhere. He'd trained for 240 hours in simulators where instructors threw every conceivable failure at him. The capsule's official name was Spacecraft Draven 13. Glenn named it Friendship 7, hoping to soften America's image abroad. The Atlas rocket beneath him had a 25% failure rate. It had exploded spectacularly several times, including once with Mercury capsule on top. The astronauts called it sitting on top of a bomb. The Atlas's skin was so thin, the thickness of a dime, that it would collapse without internal pressure. It was literally a balloon filled with explosives. Glenn's pressure suit was a modified Navy high-altitude suit that took 20 minutes to put on. If it depressurized in space, his blood would boil in 15 seconds. The faceplate fogged constantly. The gloves were so thick he could barely flip switches. The urine collection system was a condom attached to a bag that leaked regularly. Glamorous, it was not. What people didn't know, Glenn had smuggled items aboard. A small camera he bought himself because NASA's was too complicated. Notes from his children, and controversially, he'd practiced operating controls with his left hand secretly. If his right arm was injured, he wanted to still fly the capsule. NASA didn't know about these preparations. February 20th, 1962. 2:30 a.m. Glenn wakes after 3 hours sleep. Breakfast, steak, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and coffee. Bill Douglas, the astronaut's doctor, checks him over. 6:03 a.m. Glenn enters Friendship 7. A technician had taped a sign to the instrument panel. No handball playing in this area. Glenn laughed, the last laugh he'd have for 5 hours. As they sealed the hatch, Glenn noticed 120 bolts holding it shut. If something went wrong on the pad, it would take 90 seconds to open. The rocket could explode in 2. The countdown stopped 13 times for various issues. Each hold meant Glenn lay on his back, 100 feet in the air, waiting. At T-minus 22 minutes, they discovered a broken microphone bracket. Glenn had been lying there for 4 hours. Most people would have panicked. Glenn's heart rate, 69. 9:47:39 a.m. "Godspeed, John Glenn," says Scott Carpenter. The Atlas ignites with 360,000 pounds of thrust. Glenn is pressed into his couch at 6 Gs. The vibration is so violent he can't read the instruments. The rocket sounds like it's tearing apart. Glenn thinks, if this is normal, I'd hate to see abnormal. 2 minutes in, the escape tower jettisons. Now there's no abort option. Either orbit or die. At 2 minutes, 14 seconds, Glenn reports, "I feel fine. Trajectory looks good." His voice is steady. His heart rate, 110. For comparison, yours probably hit that watching this video. At 9:52 a.m., Friendship 7 reaches orbit. Glenn becomes the first American to see Earth from space. His first words weren't profound. 0G and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around. Oh, that view is tremendous. But what he saw defied description. The Earth's horizon wasn't sharp, but fuzzy, with bands of color like a rainbow. The sun didn't set. It was squeezed into an oval by atmospheric refraction, turned orange, then red, then purple, then vanished in seconds. Stars didn't twinkle. They were steady points of light against absolute black. Over Africa, Glenn saw dust storms that looked like red paint smeared across brown canvas. Lightning flashed below him in complete silence. City lights looked like glowing spider webs. But the strangest thing happened at sunrise. Thousands of luminous particles surrounded the capsule, like fireflies. "I'll try to describe what I'm seeing," Glenn radioed. "I am in a big mass of very small particles that are brilliantly lit up like they're luminescent." NASA panicked. Were they aliens? Space organisms? Debris from the capsule breaking up? Glenn wasn't worried. He found them beautiful. He tried catching them through the capsule's viewport. Later flights would reveal they were frozen droplets from the capsule's cooling system. But for those moments, John Glenn was surrounded by mystery. End of the first orbit. Telemetry shows segment 51 activated. The heat shield might be loose. If true, Glenn will incinerate during re-entry. The heat shield was the only thing that would prevent 3,000-degree plasma from turning him into ash. Without it, he'd have the most spectacular death in history. NASA doesn't tell Glenn immediately. They spend an entire orbit, 90 minutes, discussing options while he flies in ignorance. Should they tell him? Can they fix it? Should he try to land immediately? Meanwhile, Glenn's taking pictures, doing experiments, eating applesauce from a tube, completely unaware he might already be dead. Finally, they hint at the problem. "We want you to keep the retro package on through re-entry." This was insane. The retro rockets were supposed to jettison after firing. Keeping them on might help hold the heat shield, but they'd burn off during re-entry, possibly damaging the shield more. It was a gamble with Glenn's life as the stake. Glenn figured out the real problem immediately. "You think the heat shield is loose," he said. It wasn't a question. Ground control went silent, then admitted, "That's affirmative." Glenn's response revealed everything about his character. "Roger, understand. Real good." Over California, Glenn fires the retro rockets to begin re-entry. He's told to keep the retro pack attached, unprecedented and terrifying. As Friendship 7 hits the atmosphere, chunks of the retro pack tear off, flaming past his window. Glenn thinks it's the heat shield disintegrating. "I have large chunks coming off," he reports calmly, though he believes he's describing his own death. For 4 minutes, Friendship 7 is surrounded by orange and yellow flames. The capsule heats to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Radio blackout. Nobody can talk to Glenn. On live TV, Walter Cronkite removes his glasses, openly emotional, saying, "We may have lost an astronaut." Inside, Glenn watches burning chunks fly by, convinced each one is part of his heat shield. The G-forces build to 8 Gs, 8 times his body weight. His vision grays. Breathing becomes impossible. He can't lift his arms. but his mind remains clear. If I'm going to die, at least I made it to orbit. America can build on that. At 200,000 feet, the capsule starts oscillating wildly. Glenn takes manual control, fighting to keep Friendship 7 stable. If it tumbles, the parachutes won't deploy. He's flying by feel now, no computer, just a marine pilot's instinct. The capsule stabilizes. At 10,000 feet, the main parachute deploys. Glenn knows he'll survive. 20 minutes after retrofire, Friendship 7 splashes into the Atlantic, 40 miles from the predicted zone, but close enough. The destroyer USS Noah picks him up 21 minutes later. Glenn's first words on deck: "It was hot in there." Understatement of the century. When technicians examined Friendship 7, they discovered the heat shield was perfectly fine. A faulty sensor had nearly caused NASA to make fatal decisions. The burned chunks Glenn saw were just the retro pack, exactly as designed. He'd spent 20 minutes thinking he was dying for no reason. The world exploded in celebration. 4 million people lined Broadway for Glenn's ticker tape parade, more than for Lindbergh. Kennedy gave him the Distinguished Service Medal. But Glenn's greatest moment came when he addressed Congress. Instead of glory talk, he thanked the thousands of engineers, technicians, and workers who made the flight possible. "I was just the tip of the arrow," he said. NASA never let Glenn fly again in Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo. He was too valuable as a hero to risk. Kennedy personally blocked his return to space, saying, "We can't afford to lose John Glenn." It destroyed Glenn inside. He'd trained for years, proved himself, and was grounded by his own success. Glenn resigned from NASA in 1964, eventually becoming a U.S. Senator, but space never left him. In 1998, at age 77, he returned to orbit on Space Shuttle Discovery, becoming the oldest person in space. When asked why, he said, "I left something up there in 1962. I wanted to go get it.